Welcome everybody. We're slowly getting some folks coming on in. And we are also live streaming this on Facebook and recording to share later on YouTube. So welcome everyone on all those different platforms. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Hey Jason, can you give me any feedback on if there's too much sound in the background?
I think it's fine.
All right, sweet, thank you. All right. Greetings and welcome everybody. My name is Zach Sarkis. I'm the founder of New York HempLab and I will be your host today. I am accompanied by HempLab board member Jason Klimek. I'll let him do a formal introduction in a moment. But yeah, just want to give a big shout out to everyone who's on this call. We are also live streaming this on Facebook for the first time. And we will be sharing the recording on YouTube as well. Our goal for this platform is to create a real casual setting for reviewing what the law says. Jason and I have a lot of perspective to offer. We anticipate inviting more experts to be part of this conversation. All y'all who are on this Zoom call, we welcome you to offer questions in the Q&A and in the chat. That's one of the benefits you get for registering for the event. We made this event free for all HempLab members, Start Smart Coalition members, Rock Normal and all the Normal chapter members, NYCGPA members, and also friends of the Rochester Central Public Library. The idea is to get this information out to folks because that's going to ensure this, we all got a firm footing as we move forward with legalization. I want to give a big shout out to our sponsoring member, Harris Beach. Sounds like we got a couple new sponsoring members in the pipeline, but Harris Beach has been with us from the beginning and big thank you for all your support. Also our founding business members, got a good crew of folks, many who were on these calls day in, day out, who've really stood behind us in the beginning and have helped us keep the lights on. Speaking of, we got a few new business members, and thank y'all, everyone else who's been signing up, a ton of new individual members. You know, the list can keep going on and on. But we are here today to talk about New York cannabis legalization. And we are talking about a bill that has been on the floor of the Senate and Assembly for many years, championed by the Honorable Crystal People-Stokes, who's the majority leader of the Assembly, and Senator Liz Krueger. Just really, it's been such a monumental effort. And today marks an interesting day. It is 420, you know, the first legal 420 in New York State. Many folks will be celebrating the legalization of the cannabis plant. And so we are talking about a monumental bill that is covering all things cannabis in many ways. Well, specifically all things that are resin related. There are, let's just say, 3 categories of cannabis plants. There's some plants that are grown for their seed and their grain, which is a superfood. They're planted with, you know, combines or tractors similar to corn. You also have some varietals that are grown for their fiber, and they can grow up to 12 feet tall, and they can be used for building materials to clothing. And those are also planted like corn. Then we begin to look at the resin varietals, and a resin variety of cannabis could be CBD dominant, could be CBG dominant, or THC dominant. And really a lot of what this bill is covering is the resin-based plants and the world around that. Grain and fiber will be continued to be run under USDA and Ag and Markets, and we can definitely talk more about that later. But again, we are talking about cannabis, the plant regulating the resin-based varietals. So I just want to give a little bit of perspective there. Again, big shout out to all the folks who have helped create a bill that is known to be really setting the right foot forward across the country. We're looking at what is, I think beyond a lot of industry folks' hopes and dreams. You know, we got a bill that was phenomenal, and there's reasons as to why and how we got there, but it's really rooted in social justice, restorative justice with regards to trying to alter the path of history, or at least begin to try to make amends with the war on drugs and how the war on drugs disproportionately impacted communities of color and low income communities really all over. And yeah, it's truly being championed as a bill that is rooted in justice, and there's also plenty of opportunity from a business perspective. We're really here to create some depth around what it means to be getting started in this industry from a business side, as well as just what it means to be a consumer in this industry. To all y'all who are out there celebrating the first legal 420 in New York State, no longer as criminals, pretty cool feeling. But we are here to talk about cannabis legalization. So Jason, love for you to introduce yourself for a moment, and while I'm working on stuff in the background.
Sure. So I am Jason Klimek. I'm now an attorney at Woods Oviatt Gilman, the leader of the cannabis practice. And, you know, Zach and I have been doing this for quite a while now. Took a pause when we thought that the MRTA was in fact going to come down in a new revision and signed, and here we are. In terms of kind of what Zach said about this being a great bill and things like that, like I do think that it has aspects of it that are very admirable and a model for the rest of the country, particularly if you're looking at it purely from a social justice angle, insofar as minority communities tend to be disproportionately impacted by the war on cannabis. And so if we look at this as this will lessen, although I think realistically not eliminate, but certainly lessen the arrests in those communities and the criminal aspects in those communities, I think that this bill definitely 100% accomplishes that. Further, you know, it uses whatever cannabis revenue is generated, well, not whatever, a large portion, like 40%.
40%.
Funnels it back into those communities for various types of programs that those communities want to enact. So from purely that side of the equation, it's a phenomenal bill. Now, that is, I mean, it's a great thing. That is not like in my legal practice, that is not where I practice. So when I'm looking at it from the legal side of things in terms of how does this impact the market, how does this impact small businesses in New York, and how does it bring those social equity applicants into the legal market and support them? I think that, you know, I think this bill kind of falls short in a lot of areas. And it's really going to be, because so much was vested, as we'll see when we go through the bill, into the OCM, Office of Cannabis Management. It is really going to be a function of who the regulators are and can they regulate the industry that, you know, pursuant to the intent of the bill, because the bill has gives a lot of advantages to the current medical companies and large businesses and such like that. So, you know, it's going to be a very tricky thing to navigate for small businesses who are going to have higher costs of goods and things like that. And, you know, even just when you look at the I don't know if people have seen the news, but there was an article about how Green Thumbs, which I believe purchased, was it Fiorello Pharmaceuticals, which is FP Wellness here in Rochester. They are entering a sales and property tax abatement somewhere, I think downstate, maybe towards the Binghamton area. I can't remember off the top of my head, where they're going to be getting sales tax and property tax abatement in turn for, you know, the commitment to create some number of jobs. So I think that, you know, that's tough. They're a huge company, and they may not have to pay some of the taxes that otherwise smaller businesses may have to pay, giving them a further advantage. So it's going to be really incumbent upon the regulators to make sure that they are effectuating the intent of the law.
And I love that, Jason, because right here we're talking about the law. When we're reviewing the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, we are looking at the law, and we are all waiting, and it'll probably take from 6 to, 12, 18 months to actually see what the regulations look like. And that's the fine line. Those are the details. And so just want to make sure that's clear. Another little thing for folks who are on the Zoom call, feel free again to drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We already got one coming through, and yeah, for the folks out on social media, we just appreciate y'all being here. I do want to just throw, Roy asked a question, will resin-based be legal terminology used for rules and licensing? Probably not, no. It's just, that's the easiest way for me to describe, you got your grain, your fiber, and your resin, and resin plants can be all grown the same. Some are outdoor, large scale, like hemp production, a lot of it's indoor production, etc. So just, that's part of my own nuance in the language we've been using through HempLab. Appreciate the question. So the way that we are going to start this program is start with the definitions. We think that's a really important place to start because it sets the context for the whole bill. Again, the way Jason and I want to approach this is, HempLab, where'd that idea come from? The idea is that, like, if you're studying in school and you have a science class, you may also have a lab where you go with your fellow classmates or some TAs, and you can ask questions and have a collaborative learning experience. So that's kind of the root of how HempLab was formed, and that's how we're approaching this workshop series. Y'all got questions? Feel free to drop a question in the chat, in the Q&A, and we'll answer them live. If we don't have an answer, or we're not the experts to answer them, we'll be sure to find the right folks who can and follow up. Again, the layout of this program is every Tuesday through at least May. We're going to spend an hour at a time, and we'll go section by section, and we'll post again our videos on YouTube, and it'll outline what section we've talked about. So if folks want to just check out the hour-long snippet that's focused on just adult use taxes or just the definitions, you'll be able to find that pretty easily. So yeah, without further ado, I think we're going to start exploring what the definitions look like. So Jason, you want to add anything as to why we want to start with definitions?
Definitions control everything. So, if we're talking about cannabis, well, what does cannabis mean? They define it. And that's how the law works, is if it's not in the definition, then it's not really part of the law until it's either amended or a court says it is. So the definitions kind of control everything that we're going to be talking about. And just a note too, that you may see green text throughout this bill, and that's typically used to highlight changes in previous versions. Although, as we found out, there were changes made between what could be referred to as the MRTA C text that was released last year, I think it was, or even the beginning of this year, and what was signed into law. There were changes that weren't necessarily highlighted in the green text. I don't know why, but we did kind of come across some of those. So those green texts are changes, but not all changes are in green text.
Yep, and just further thoughts, you can see there's some yellow highlighted stuff. That's just for us. We're gonna have sections that are highlighted that we think are really important to bring to the table. It's also helping us stay organized as we flow through this document. The last time we did the MRTA workshop, we really took it line by line. We'll probably do a little bit more synthesizing just to keep it less dry. We got some great feedback from the NYC GPA, Dan Livingston, the communications director, how to better communicate. So we're definitely working on that. And yeah, so let me just see before we start reading some of these definitions. We will definitely, Clifford, we'll make sure we get to that as we move forward. But Jason, do you want to start with the definitions, and then we'll kind of popcorn it back and forth?
Sure.
Cool.
Applicant unless otherwise specified in this chapter, shall mean a person applying for any cannabis, medical cannabis, or cannabinoid hemp license or permit issued by the New York State Cannabis Control Board pursuant to this chapter that has a significant presence in New York State, either individually or by having a principal corporate location in the state, is incorporated or otherwise organized under the laws of the state, or a majority of the ownership or residents of the state. For purposes of this subdivision, person means an individual, institution, corporation, government, or governmental subdivision or agency, business trust, estate, trust, partnership, or association, or other legal entity. So just remember, whenever person is used, it means basically any legal entity, human or otherwise.
And same with applicant here as well. Great.
Cannabinoid means the phytocannabinoids found in hemp and does not include synthetic cannabinoids as the term is defined in subdivision G of Schedule 1 of Section 3306 of the Public Health Law. So that is going to be important kind of in the context of the whole Delta 8 discussion. Because when you start, I started digging through like the public health law, looking at what is a controlled substance and all this stuff. And, there's definitely an argument that Delta 8 is illegal in New York. And certainly now will be regulated under OCM or, the MRTA rules. So that's an important thing, I think, for some context. All right, cannabinoid hemp means any hemp and any product processed or derived from hemp that is used for human consumption, provided that when such product is packaged or offered for retail sale to a consumer, it shall not have a concentration of more than 0.3% delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. No, just a note, that's delta-9, not total THC, so it differs there from the USDA definitions. So, just because you're state legal for hemp doesn't necessarily mean you're federally legal. So anybody still in the hemp trade, just watch out for that little quirk, because you could find yourself trafficking a controlled substance if you go across a state line.
And in the same conversation of the Delta 8, we're also seeing a lot of products on the market, cannabinoid hemp, that have below 0.3% Delta-9 THC, that may have, some substance of total Delta-9 in it. It might have a handful of milligrams in a product. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see, it says here no more than 0.3%. But we are seeing some products that actually have a substantial amount of THC in them. And I'm curious if we are going to see a THC cap. That's something that we will talk about later. But just if you're looking at products on the market, you may have seen that yourself. Cannabinoid hemp processor license means a license granted by the office to process, extract, pack, or manufacture cannabinoid hemp or hemp extracts into products, whether in intermediate or final form used for human consumption. So that's really that's a carryover from the 2014 Farm Bill, where people got their licenses to do processing, and then it was introduced into the hemp extract bill that has now been folded into this document. Cannabis means all parts of the plant of the genus Cannabis, whether growing or not, the seeds thereof, the resin extracted from any part of the plant, and every compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the plant, its seeds or resin. It does not include the mature stalks of the plant, fiber produced from the stalks, oil or cake made from the seeds of the plant, or any other compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the stalks, except the resin extracted therefrom, fiber, oil, or cake. The sterilized seed of the plant, which is incapable of germination. It does not include hemp, cannabinoid hemp, or hemp extract as defined by this section, or any drugs approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration. So basically, like I said, cannabis is basically, they're calling cannabis like THC varietals or THC dominant type 2 varietals. They are not regulating the fiber. They're not regulating the grain. That's going to be USDA and Ag and Markets. But it is all parts of the plant that are related to more of those THC leaning plants, where cannabinoid hemp is cannabis that is CBD dominant or CBG, I think, under the existing regs or understanding. So all food for thought.
Although it could also be, you could have a very high CBD dominant varietal, but you're over the 0.3 delta 9, and 100%. Now you're back into cannabis.
Yep, especially on a federal level, which we did see the new regs come out, which is, I think it allows for up to close to 1% total. And you still you wouldn't have to burn your crop, which I think is important to acknowledge, because even for the grain and fiber varieties, just ensuring that THC content isn't hot and would lead to crop failure or crop destruction is just important. But yeah. Cannabis consumer means a person is 21 years of age or older, acting in accordance with any provision of this chapter. So again, any cannabis products in the adult use market will be sold to folks over the age of 21. I think there are some limitations on CBD products, like CBD vape products must be to 21 years or older. If you're selling any flower that's marked CBD flower marked as smokable, it'll have to be to folks over 21 and through a dispensary. And I do think that CBD in general products, like for ingestion, have to be 18 or older. Do you remember if that's true, Jason?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
All right, well, we'll cover that. Don't you worry. All right, so then we keep on. You want to pick up here, Jason?
Sure. So the Cannabis Control Board means the Cannabis Control Board created pursuant to Article 2 of this chapter. Cannabis flower means the flower of the plant of the genus Cannabis that has been harvested, dried, and cured prior to processing, whereby the plant material is transformed into concentrate, including but not limited to concentrated cannabis or edible or topical product containing cannabis or concentrated cannabis and other ingredients. Cannabis flower excludes leaves and stems. Cannabis product or adult use cannabis product means cannabis, concentrated cannabis, and cannabis infused products for use by cannabis consumers. Cannabis infused products means products that have been manufactured and contain either cannabis or cannabis concentrated cannabis and other ingredients that are intended for use or consumption. Cannabis trim means all parts of the plant of the genus Cannabis other than the cannabis flower that have been harvested, dried, and cured, but prior to any further processing. Caring for means treating a patient in the course.
Oops. Jason, 1 second. I actually do want to just acknowledge, I was on mute there for a second, but yeah, these cannabis products from the flower, infused, et cetera, those we'll see speckled throughout this document, especially when we get into retail, manufacturing, et cetera. They'll have limitations on to who or where they can go, how they can be used. Also definitions from in the medical as well as the recreational, and also kind of like in this home grow world. So it's not just limited to adult use rec, but kind of more of a comprehensive terminology. So those are the baselines that we can outline. And now we're beginning to we see this, the number 12, caring for. So we're beginning to look at the medical definition, and there's definitely some really interesting updates. I think we have a few folks that will be coming to join us when we're talking about the medical program, because it has some advancements, including home grow and access to other products. So just wanted to add that there. And I'm happy to pick up. So caring for, go ahead, Jason.
Just to go back for 1 second to the products, the infused products and all that flour, important on the tax aspects too, because as we know, as has been just horrifically reported in many, many news articles as it was breaking, we don't have a 13% tax in New York. We have a 13% tax plus the THC milligram tax, and it's broken out by flour, edibles, and concentrate. So those definitions become very important because that determines how much tax. As it's written, a retail dispensary would pay to a distributor to acquire the product.
Great, appreciate that. So caring for means treating a patient in the course of which the practitioner has completed a full assessment of the patient's medical history and current medical conditions. Certification means a certification made under this chapter. Certified medical use includes the acquisition, cultivation, manufacture, delivery, harvest, possession, preparation, transfer, the acquisition, administration, cultivation, manufacture, delivery, harvest, possession, preparation, transfer, or transportation of medical paraphernalia related to the administration of cannabis, including whole cannabis flower, which is a big thing, to treat or alleviate a certified patient's medical condition or symptoms associated with the medical patient's medical condition. So if y'all didn't know, folks in New York State medical market did not have access to flower. In the past probably year, we've seen some kind of loophole where dispensaries were grinding up their flower and selling it prepackaged, but like chopped up and calling it a not a smoking product, but like recommending it maybe for vape use. And that was the way they were like distributing flower products to patients. But now it's evident that whole flower can be something patients have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Certified patient means a patient who is a resident of New York State or receiving care and treatment in New York State as determined by the board and regulation and is certified under this chapter. Chief Equity Officer means the Chief Equity Officer of Office of Cannabis Management. We will probably look into that a little bit more on the next workshop. Concentrated cannabis means a separated resin, whether crude or purified, obtained from cannabis, or B, a material, preparation, mixture, compound, or substance which contains more than 3% by weight or by volume total THC as defined in this section. That's a super important thing because we will see that in the hemp extract bill or the hemp world, we're allowed, there's allowed to be the passage of crude or raw cannabis extract oil or CBD extract oil that is allowed to have up to 3% THC in it, as long as it's going between an extractor or a processor and a manufacturer. And that gives a lot of leeway in state, which wouldn't be federally legal, but allows for someone to get a product processed somewhere and legally transport that process with a higher concentration THC to another regulated place that can mitigate the THC or dilute it or reduce, get it back to that 0.3%. So just an important note right there. Jason, you want to take condition?
Sure. All right. So condition means having one of the following conditions: cancer, positive status for HIV or AIDS, ALS, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, damage to nervous tissue of the spinal cord with objective neurological indication of intractable spasticity, epilepsy, inflammatory bowel disease, neuropathies, Huntington's disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, pain that degrades health and function capability, where the use of medical cannabis is an alternative to opioid use, substance use disorder, Alzheimer's, muscular dystrophy, dystonia, rheumatoid arthritis, autism, or any other condition certified by a practitioner. That's expansive. Prior to that, it was the listed conditions, and then I think it was the commissioner of the Department of Health could expand that. They had expanded it to things like chronic pain, so headaches or backaches, things like that could be certified. Now it's or any other condition certified by a practitioner. So they are kind of blowing up the medical market by allowing any practitioner to certify and say, hey, I think cannabis is an alternative here that we can use. So that's a huge change for the law.
Yeah, and I love that. We got some comments. Frank said, "Love seeing cannabis promoted as an alternative to opiates." Anyone who's hasn't been sleeping the past 20, 30, 40 years knows the really gut-wrenching impact of the opioid epidemic. And I think that was something that's really exciting to see come into play in the past 2 years. I wish it would have come back into play years before, because the epidemic has definitely devastated my personal community. So I get some joy and some sadness in the same breath when I see that. So appreciate you pointing that out, Frank.
And this will be good too, because now that this creates at least state legal cannabis, there's research licenses, there's grant funding. This means doctors can hopefully start to be more informed, because one of the things doctors look at a lot of times is in a clinical environment. They're looking at studies for, let's call it, pharmaceuticals. I give this many milligrams per kilogram of body weight. These are the contraindications. There's a whole raft of things that they can really say to the patient and give them an informed decision of, I suggest this medicine, but here are the potential downsides that we know about. And let's talk about it, versus cannabis, because there hasn't been a lot of study on just even the generalities of the effects, is very tough. let alone the specifics, because, once you start getting into more of a full spectrum product, you now have introduced tons of variables into the equation. And so that's hard.
Yeah. Yep. So we can pick it up on cultivation. This is a big thing, and we got a couple questions about hemp. Clifford, I appreciate your questions, and we will plan on getting them. So just another clarification, we plan on talking through these definitions and then leaving some time at the end. Ideally, we're like 70-30 split of like reading and talking about the bill and then asking questions. So if we don't answer it in our flow, we will definitely do our best to get to it. And Clifford, you're at the top of the list, so thank you so much. And then we see a hand raised. Roy, feel free to drop in the chat or into the Q&A if you got something specifically you'd like to ask or address. And yeah, Ashley says doing pretty well, but the legal jargon makes them do somersaults in the mind. So that's what we're here to help. Try to calm all that's going there and make this really digestible. So cultivation means growing, cloning, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, and trimming of cannabis plants for the sale of certain other categories of cannabis license and permit holders. So that's a pretty good range there. So folks who are cultivating can grow, clone, harvest, dry, cure, grade, and trim. Delivery means direct delivery of cannabis products by a retail licensee, micro business licensee, or delivery licensee to a cannabis consumer. So that's direct to consumer. And you see that there's a few different doorways there. Retail has access to delivery. They'll still have to get a delivery license, if I'm not mistaken. Micro business licensee will have access to that as well, but we'll have to qualify. And same with delivery license specific. Designated caregiver facility. I'll take this one, the next two, and then I'll send it your way, Jason. So designated caregiver facility. Actually, let's just see if there's a Q in there. Okay, great. So designated caregiver facility means a facility that registers with the office to assist one or more certified patients with the acquisition, possession, delivery, transportation, or administration of medical cannabis, and is a general hospital or residential health care facility operating pursuant to Article 28 of the Public Health Law, an adult care facility operating pursuant to its specific titles, a community health residence that's pursuant to the mental hygiene law, a hospital also operating on the mental hygiene law, a mental hygiene facility, a inpatient or residential treatment program, which is pretty awesome. Residential facility for the care and treatment of persons with developmental disabilities operating pursuant to the mental health hygiene law, a residential treatment facility for children and youth, a private or public school, which is very interesting, a research institution with the internal review board, and any other facility as determined by the board. So those are all folks that are connected to this medical definition of providing with or supporting with the acquisition, the possession, delivery, transportation, or administration of medical cannabis. Designated caregiver means an individual designated by a certified patient in a registry application. A certified patient may designate up to 5 designated caregivers, not counting designated caregiver facilities or designated caregiver facilities employees. So designated caregiver is a term that we're going to look at more and more and seeing how that connects to possibly medical home grow, or maybe it's someone who is picking up someone's medicine for them. Designated caregiver facility employee means someone who works at, who's an employee of a designated caregiver facility. So Jason, take it away, distributor, unless you got something else you want to say.
Distributor means any person who sells at wholesale any cannabis product except medical cannabis, for the sale of which a license is required under the provisions of this chapter. So that will become very important because this is a substantial change from the prior MRTA. It'll be good to discuss this once we get more into the licensing, so keep that one in mind. Executive director means the executive director of the Office of Cannabis Management. Form of medical cannabis means characteristic of the medical cannabis recommended or limited for a particular certified patient, including the method of consumption and any particular strains, variety, and quantity or percentage of cannabis or particular active ingredient or whole cannabis flower. Hemp means the plant Cannabis sativa L and any part of such plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a delta 9 concentration of not more than 0.3% by dry weight basis. It shall not include medical cannabis. So interesting is if you convert, and I'm not super up on the chemistry here, so forgive me, but if you create delta 8 from hemp, that would be covered under that because delta 8 is an, I believe, isomer. So it, as long as the delta 9 was under 0.3%, then your delta 8 would fall under the definition of hemp and therefore hemp extract.
And that's what the mindset a lot of folks are operating under right now. If you go into retailers or people who are producing it, they're calling it is a derivative, an isomer of CBD. You know, it's a conversion process where CBD is exposed to an acid of some sort, then allows it to convert into delta 8. So yeah, love that note, and it kind of gives light onto how folks are operating right now.
Yep. All right, hemp extract means all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers derived from hemp used or intended for human consumption for its cannabinoid content with a delta 9 THC concentration of not more than an amount determined by the Office of Regulation. For the purpose of this article, hemp extract includes any food ingredient, or food additive that is generally recognized as safe pursuant to federal law, or any extract that is not used for human consumption. Such excluded substances shall not be regulated pursuant to the provisions of this article, but are subject to other provisions of applicable state law, rules, and regulations. Labor peace agreement means an agreement between an entity and the labor organization that, at minimum, protects the state's proprietary interest by prohibiting labor organizations and members from engaging in picketing, work stoppages, boycotts, and any other economic interference with the entity. Laboratory testing facility means any independent laboratory capable of testing cannabis and cannabis products for adult use and medical use, cannabinoid hemp and hemp extract, or for all categories of cannabis and cannabis products as per regulation set forth by the State Cannabis Control Board.
That one's gonna be really interesting because currently there aren't many. And so we'll see how many populate. And you have, New York City itself is one of the world's largest cannabis consumption places. And so when you try to imagine how many products there will be, how many people will be growing, then how many laboratory tests will be required, we're definitely gonna need some serious infrastructure. Food for thought.
We know that was an issue too out in California, because they had I think when they first legalized for adult use, they had something like 5 labs licensed, and they predicted they needed like 20 something, and it produced a shortage at retail because the cultivators and manufacturers couldn't get their products certified to get them to the retail dispensary. So that was a big problem. So hopefully, there are people who are interested in pursuing testing licenses, and that the state authorizes them, because that can definitely be a big bottleneck. All right, license means a written. Sorry. Do you want to say something?
I saw. So I'm guessing it's Michael Bowers asked a few different questions. Guesstimated how many licenses will be available. We have no idea. Hopefully a lot. Will there be a mileage determining locations from current medical dispensary? I'm wondering, you may be asking about how close in proximity medical dispensaries can be, or how close other retailers could be to a medical. Good question. That's probably gonna be defined in the regs. Has anyone been chosen for the OCM yet? Not that I'm aware of, but we know folks such as NYCGPA and I think Start Smart are beginning to submit applicants to sit on the OCM. Or and then will the 20-person advisory board consist of only doctors? No, the advisory board's pretty comprehensive. Folks from all over the government as well as representatives of the industry, but we will cross that bridge as we get closer to the board. Again, that's going to be the next workshop. So thank you. And then, yeah, let's, what do we just take off on or leave off on there?
License. You want me to continue or you want to pick up?
License means a written authorization is provided under this chapter permitting persons to engage in a specified activity authorized pursuant to this chapter. Licensee means an individual or entity who has been granted a license under this chapter. Medical cannabis means cannabis is defined in the section intended for certified medical use as determined by the board in consultation with the Commissioner of Health. Micro business, this is a big one, means a licensee that may act as a cannabis producer for the cultivation of cannabis, a cannabis processor, and a cannabis distributor and a cannabis retailer under this article, provided such licensee complies with all requirements imposed by this article on the licensed producers, processors, distributors, and retailers to the extent the licensee engages in such activities. So we'll call that the micro vertical, where we'll also be touching on large scale vertical integration.
And just to preempt questions that will come, we have no idea how big they're going to allow you to be. It could be 1,000 square feet of grow space. It could be 10,000. We literally do not know. So that's one of the big unknowns, because micro business may sound really good, but if it's so small that it's really, you can only really be a very small business, maybe it's not as attractive. That we will not know probably until the regulations.
Great question, or great offering there. But it's something that's got a lot of people excited. So Sibby said, do micro businesses need to be vertically integrated? There's no need. It's just you have the option. It shows that if you're going to choose in vertical integration, you'd still have to be qualified or certified to do the production, processing, distribution, and retailing. But I'm sure you could just operate under smaller sections of that.
Notice that in the definition, it's may. May act. So unless the regulations change something, then that would mean that you can do any one or all of those. But one of the things I believe that we will get into when we get into the micro license is you're pretty much constrained to your own silo. Basically anything you're producing, you're selling through your own retail dispensary. So if you only did a piece, it would be tough.
We just got an interesting question in the Q&A from Matt. When will the regulations be determined and released publicly, and how do they change over time? You got any perspective on that?
I mean, we have no idea when they'll be released. What I've been saying is 6 to 12 months is probably about right. They don't technically need public input. New York doesn't have the equivalent requirement like the federal government does, where they have to publish the proposed regulations and get public comment and then revise them. But they have done that in the past, most recently with the hemp regs, that they got public comment, and that comment period was open for quite a while. So, I would suspect that they will look to public comment for the regulations, and then they can be enacted. And then how do they change over time? I think there is a mandate in the law that they kind of review everything every few years and adjust. And I'm sure that, because this is a brand new market with a law that really isn't like any other law in any other state, they're going to have to tweak things if they see too much cannabis out there, too little cannabis out there, one particular segment dominating everybody else. That could be where the regulators come in and start tinkering with the regulations so that they can kind of, do what they think is the best thing for the market. So, they can do that. They will do that. I'm sure of it.
And just quickly, David said, any thoughts on converting current hemp licenses to grow under these regs? I know there's discussion about that. NYCGPA has been working really hard to ensure, or at least, provide access for the hemp farmers into this industry.
I don't think there's going to be any conversion, though. I think you're going to apply like every other adult use license. You can reference that you had a hemp license, but there's nothing in this signed law that says you can do that. In fact, it mandates everybody go through this adult use license application process. And I don't think the regulations could really change that. So, I mean, I would very much prepare for, if you have a hemp license, you're still going to need to apply like everybody else. Whether there will be any prioritization or anything like that, I don't know. I don't suspect so because there's no indication of that in the law. But that may be something a regulation could say, hey, you know, because you already met the qualifications here, we may allow a little more expedited process, but we'd have to see on that. But as of right now, there's no conversion, prioritization, or anything like that.
Yep, but there are folks working for it, so just keep your ears peeled, and I really appreciate your perspective, Jason. Nursery means a licensee that produces only clones, immature plants, seeds, or other agricultural products used specifically for the planting, propagation, and cultivation of cannabis by a licensed adult use cannabis cultivators, microbusinesses, cooperatives, and registered organizations. Office or Office of Cannabis Management means the New York State Office of Cannabis Management. On-site consumption means consumption of cannabis in an area licensed as provided by this chapter. That's going to be an interesting one to talk about. Yeah, Sibby has a quick question. Are nurseries allowed to sell to the public? That's going to be defined in the regs. And we know that there's definitely an opportunity to provide folks who are doing home grow. And there's the medical side, there's adult use side.
It also, and we'll get into this when we get into licenses, it appears that a nursery can hold a dispensary license. I don't believe there's a prohibition, but we'll check that when we get to it. And if that's the case, then yes, you could sell, because only dispensary license holders, you know, we won't talk about on-site consumption and all that stuff, just dispensary right now, can sell to consumers. You know, anybody holding cultivation, processing, and all that can't. Even a nursery wouldn't allow you to, unless you can hold this dispensary license, in which case, yes, you could.
Oh, that's an interesting interpretation. I would bet that the regs would be not so defined. Like if you, there's no, I would be so surprised if you could only buy a clone from a dispensary. I think it's going to be, that's
think about it from the perspective of New York. You could always just get another license and pay them a fee, and then you can do it, because it's New York and that's what they do.
Valid. You want to take the package? You want to start there for me?
Package means any container or receptacle used for holding cannabis or cannabis products. Permit means a permit issued pursuant to this chapter. Permittee means any person to whom a permit has been issued pursuant to this chapter. Practitioner means a practitioner who is licensed, registered, or certified by New York State to prescribe controlled substances within the state. Nothing in this chapter shall be interpreted so as to give any such person authority to act outside their scope of practice as defined in Title 8 of the Education Law. Additionally, nothing in this chapter shall be interpreted to allow any unlicensed, unregistered, or uncertified person to act in a manner that would require a license, registration, or certification pursuant to Title 8 of the Education Law. Processor means a licensee that extracts concentrated cannabis and or compounds, blends, extracts, infuses, or otherwise manufactures concentrated cannabis or cannabis products, but not the cultivation of the cannabis contained in the cannabis product. Registered organization means an organization registered under Article 3 of this chapter, aka medical marijuana companies. Registry application means an application properly completed and filed with the board by a certified patient under Article 3 of this chapter. Registry identification card means a document that identifies a certified patient or designated caregiver as provided in this chapter. Retail sale means to solicit or receive an order for, to keep or expose for sale, and to keep with intent to sell, made by any licensed person, important, licensed person, whether principal, proprietor, agent, or employee of any cannabis product, cannabinoid, hemp, or hemp extract product to a cannabis consumer for any purpose other than resale. Retailer means any person who sells at retail any cannabis product, the sale of which a license is required under the provisions of this chapter.
We got an interesting question from Marilyn. Apologize if I didn't pronounce that right. But will there be different tiers regarding cost of licenses and registrations to include different demographics? We will see a lot of that language downstream that kind of clarifies, again, as we said, minority groups and prioritizing access and equity through license distribution. So I think we will see some stuff like that. I think the regs that we're all waiting on will be further defining that, but it's a great question. And I think we'll see something of that nature.
And we also know that in terms of like cost of licenses, there, you know, if you're a social equity applicant, there may be some reduction in costs and things like that. But as for like tiered, yeah, that we do not know. But I do kind of expect that there will at least be tiered grow licenses. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's probably something that will happen.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I'll take the last swing here. Small business means a business as defined in the section 131 of the Economic Development Law and shall apply for purposes of this chapter where any inconsistencies exist. Smoking means the burning of a lighted cigar, cigarette pipe, or any other matter or substance which contains cannabis, including the use of an electronic smoking device that creates an aerosol or vapor. Social and economic equity applicant means an individual or entity who is eligible for priority licensing pursuant to the criteria established in Article 4 of this chapter. Terminally ill means an individual who has medical prognosis that the individual's life expectancy is approximately 1 year or less if the illness runs its normal course. THC or delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol or delta-8 THC or delta-10 THC and the optical isomer of such substances.
So
which is interesting. Yeah.
Right. Delta-8 is defined as THC in the law. So wherever you see THC, delta-8's included.
And that's maybe where we're going to see some conflict of like, well, you define any derivatives of CBD and CBD hemp as that could qualify as delta-8, but here it's explicitly listed as well. So I'm curious, like, if that contradiction will be addressed in the regs. All right, total THC means the sum of percentage by weight or volume measurement of tetrahydrocannabinolic acid multiplied by 0.877 plus a percentage by weight or volume measurement of THC. So that's your THCA, which is, you know, more of the live, you can think of it, and not necessarily bioavailable THC, which for human consumption, well, delta-9 is bioavailable. And so they're combining those two things. And when you decarboxylate or heat up the THCA, decarboxylate means to remove the A at the end of that, so it just becomes THC. They say it's the weight times 0.877, so it's slightly less than a 1-to-1 ratio. Like once you heat it up, it loses some volume, and then they add that to the other THC, that is the delta-9. It's
important to know this because this is going to be part of the calculation of the THC tax, because the bill does provide, you know, that you have to do this calculation, which actually is beneficial because the delta-9 is the psychoactive version of THC. THCA is not psychoactive. So in order to have psychoactivity, you have to remove that acid group, which is 12.3% of the weight of the THCA molecule. So they're saying, okay, we just want to get at the delta-9, but that's an important calculation because whenever the tax is being calculated, that's got to be part of it.
Yep. Warehouse, or we're going to end up here, and we still got a few minutes for Q&A. So just to finish the definition, warehouse means and includes a place in which cannabis products are securely housed or stored. Wholesale means to solicit or receive an order for, to keep or expose for sale, and to keep with the intent to sell, made by any licensed person, whether principal, proprietor, agent, or employee of any adult use, medical use cannabis or cannabis product or cannabinoid hemp and hemp extract product for the purpose of resale. Okay, folks, there you have the definitions. I'm going to just exit out, stop that screen share. Yeah, we wanted to start here because this sets the framework for everything to come. We'll refer to these definitions again and again. You'll see them, just a good starting point. And you can see there's a ton of questions that come out just within this little session. And it's really, these questions inform what we want to see in the regs. So asking what the license structure is going to look like. Those are important things to keep in our mind. And also begin to have the conversation with our local legislators, our statewide legislators, and folks who are going to influence how regs are shaped. Ashley asked a question, do you know who will fall under the category of social and economic equity applicant? Jason, do you have the list off the top of your head?
We do know, we will get into it, but essentially it's women and minority owned businesses, disadvantaged farmers, disabled veterans. I feel like folks, I might be
yeah, the number one thing is folks disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, and communities of color specifically. So that's what we're looking at there.
If you want to download a copy of the MRTA, just go to nysenate.gov.
Oh, actually, could you put that in the chat by chance?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I think it's senate.ny.gov. Search for Bill S-854. That's in the chat now, and you'll be able to pull down. You'll see the whole entire history.
For some reason, that didn't translate directly into a link. I'm not sure if folks can copy and paste that, but we'll be sure to send. So a follow-up for this presentation, we're going to send the recording on YouTube. We are going to, we can also send the bill. Sweet, we got something. Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. PDF just got dropped in there, but we'll make sure those resources are accessible. So Frank asked the question, is there anything all of these smoke vape shops and corner stores that sell Delta 8 gummies, CBD flower can do to be able to sell cannabis?
A dispensary license.
Yeah, it's basically going to be getting a dispensary license is no matter what they're going to need to do. So just because you have a retail license doesn't mean you're going to have a dispensary license. And folks will all these folks who are selling cannabinoid products, hemp-based, whatever, are going to have to get a retail license. We're waiting on the specific regs through the extract portion of this bill that should be coming out in the next couple months, hopefully. We'll keep our ear to the ground and keep you all informed, but it's definitely the hemp retailer is going to be different than the dispensary owner. So just food for thought there. We got a question. Can Jason break down how to calculate the real New York State tax rate?
We will do that in the future because I can't do it in 5 minutes. Well, I can, but nobody will understand. And it'd probably be helpful if we had kind of like, if I had a flow chart of just kind of how it works, because it is a complicated calculation. And, that was one of the things that with Kaylin Castetter and the Castetter Cannabis group, we did a tax breakdown, a brief, where we kind of went through all the negatives of this tax. And one is that it adds a tremendous amount of complexity. It's not just, tax 30% flat, and there you go. It's do these calculations, do it at the right level, run it through to the end user. So they're complicated. It's going to produce a lot of mistakes, and there will be a tremendous amount of audits, basically guaranteed.
Yep. All right, so Clifford, let's see if we can take a whack at some of your questions. Is there any change in the status to New York hemp law under DOH that will impact New York State's ruling to allow the use of CBD in foods, beverages, nutritional substances, which supersedes the FDA current ban on CBD use being on it? I think, yes, one of the big things in the hemp extract bill, which diverges from federal regulations, is allowing for CBD to be in food and beverage. That's a big thing, hopefully opening a market. There's a lot of people excited about that. There's specific amounts that we'll cover later, but those doors are opening. It seems that the bill admirably supports social equity, given the lion's share to existing, but it's also giving the lion's share to existing vertically integrated medical companies who will end up with 80% of the market. How can small New York company compete in this environment? What impact will this new law have on existing hemp growers and processors under the new combined regulatory regime? Well, one thing that's hoped is that extractors, New York State extractors, can sell into the medical market under the Office of Cannabis Management. That is a hope. There is some concern about the vertical integrated ROs having early access to the market because they'll, there's going to be a steep price point to it, but they'll be allowed to operate and have retail dispensaries. One thing to consider is without vertically integrated companies converting into adult use, it may take twice as long to see cannabis products on the shelf. And if there's something to celebrate that, it is 18 months after the first adult use products are sold in New York State, home grow will be allowed. So the sooner the better from folks who want to grow at home. It's definitely a scary thing from a lot of folks in the industry, thinking that there's this market advantage for vertically integrated ROs to enter the market, and that's all food for thought.
In my opinion, too, one of the biggest things is going to be the cost, the wholesale cost of cannabis, and getting that dollar per gram number as low as possible. We know that the ROs are going to have a tremendous advantage there, given their financial capabilities, their experience in the industry, and things like that. So if they're getting wholesale costs in the $3-4 range per gram, and the rest of the market is $7-8 per gram, like it is in Massachusetts, then there's going to be pretty big disparities. And the question will be, do the ROs undercut everybody? Do they make just exorbitant profits and charge what the rest of the market is? Right now, if you go to a medical dispensary, you can get a 3.5 grams of flower for about like $45, which is consistent-ish with the illicit market. But that's with a 7% tax from a fully vertically integrated huge company. If we apply, when we do the calculations, you'll see, but a $7 or $8 gram at wholesale equates to like a $70 ETH at retail. So, you could see some pretty big differences there, and that's going to be one of the issues to overcome.
Yep. Last 2 questions, or maybe 3 questions. I'm going to just fire from the hip here. We got a hard stop at 1 p.m. today. Forefather CBD, do you believe they're going to keep the hemp flower ban in the final regs? No, hemp is now legal. Hemp flower, anything labeled as a smokable flower will have to be sold in an adult use dispensary. As I interpret the law, flower is allowed. We are waiting on the regs to define exactly what that looks like from a hemp retail perspective, but there is no longer hemp flower ban in the hemp extract law, which is pretty exciting. Is there a PR campaign underway for New York to publicize how all this is going to work? You're looking at it, folks. Start Smart Coalition, NYCGPA, and all the Rock Normal, HempLab as well. We're all doing the best we can to bring education to the forefront, and that's why we're streaming this live. That's what we're doing here today. So there's nothing being outlined by the government. I know there's certain things like Crystal Peoples-Stokes' office has been running an expungement clinic. We're going to see more of that kind of stuff going on for folks who have previous convicted of crimes connected to cannabis.
Also, the Monroe County Bar Association, I believe in May, will be putting on a panel about legalization. I believe myself, potentially Senator Jeremy Cooney, and a few others will be talking. Senator Cooney has been extremely active on the legalization side in terms of once the law was passed, trying to talk about economic development and social equity. So his office, I'm sure, is a great resource too.
Yep. And last 2 questions about medical. Kyle, we will get to that. Great question. I think we'll see some language around there, but we're going to wrap this up, folks. Thank you all so much for being here. And yeah, hopefully, please give us some feedback if you have any questions. Keep an eye out in the next day. We'll send you this recording as well as some other links that we talked about. And we will be here every Tuesday for the next few weeks. So join in. We'll be talking shop and reviewing this and bringing more folks to the table to help us really outline what cannabis legalization looks like in New York State. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We are a member-supported organization. Thank you for everyone who has been supporting us these past months and past years. Again, big shout out to Harris Beach Law Firm for being our sponsoring member. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everybody. Celebrate in whatever way you want that cannabis is legalized, from the grain, the fiber, to the resin. And we will see you around soon. Take care. Bye now.